There is pride in doing things yourself. Building a deck, fixing your car, even filing your taxes. But when it comes to retirement, well, DIY can only take you so far. So how do you know when it's time to bring in a professional? Today we're covering 5 clear signs that it's time to stop DIYing your retirement plan. Jim, let's start with sign number 1. It's one a lot of savers run into, though. Apparently, your income goes up and so does your savings. Why does that make retirement planning harder?
Yeah, it's funny because the real problem with this is we all get our first job and we're all taught, you should be putting 10% away a year, and you do. And initially, that 10% is a little bit of a pinch. It's a bit of a bind. It's a bit of a struggle. And then lo and behold, over time, our salaries increase, our income increases, and we find some discretionary income. When that happens, this whole idea of savings becomes vastly more complicated. What do you do with the excess? How do we soak that up? Do we use that to retire debt earlier? Do we use that for savings? And if we're using it in a 401k and we're funding after-tax dollars, like a Roth, do we now continue funding that, or do we fund pre-tax dollars?
Maybe we could go to dinner?
Or maybe dinner. Yes, there's plenty of fun things you can do with it as well. But as a financial planner, we think everybody just wants to save everything they've got. So where else do we put money? If it's not inside the corporate plan, are we going to use a Roth? Are we eligible for a Roth IRA? And what about HSA savings programs? If we're not participating and have the ability, do we use that? Do we put more money away? So there's this complication that happens as we start to build wealth in a number of different tax-related buckets. We've talked time and again about triangulation, having money in pre-tax, which is ultimately taxable down the road, have money in tax-free, which is available to us without taxes down the road. And then this concept of tax preferred, where the distribution off the account may or may not be taxable, depending on harvesting capital gains or long-term gains that we would have on the sale. So how do we now take this excess discretionary income and start building out these 3 different buckets? It becomes vastly more complicated than simply saying, well, I think I can increase my savings from 10% to 12%.
So what do you do?
The best thing to do generally is to seek out some degree of advice, get somebody who might very well be able to help kind of orchestrate this, figure out how much money we really need to accumulate with respect to retirement, what that would look like, and then how along the path do we get to a point where we now have 3 different buckets, each with a different tax structure, which then makes conversion into cash flow that much more efficient.
All right. Another sign that maybe you should go find yourself a professional, you don't have the time anymore. I mean, you just don't have it. Life gets busy and you can't sit down and look at your finances.
That happens to a lot of people, and it happens in a lot of areas. At first, we're a society where we're generally rewarded by what we know. It's all about the how. I know how to do this. I know how to do that. If you're an engineer, as many of our clients are, your promotions and such are also based on how brilliant you are at solutions. And this is all about the how, understanding physics and engineering, etc. But there's only so much we can do with that because our life becomes more complicated. Our careers become more demanding. We have families and we want to spend time with spouses and children. We might have community pursuits. And all of a sudden, we have no time. And if we want to maintain these things, we've got to figure out how we can leverage this time. And the best way to do that is find not the how, but find the who. Who is it that I can burden with some of this stuff that then allows me the time to do the things that I get the most enjoyment out of? this hit home many years ago to me. My wife and I bought our first home. We had it built. It was a tiny little house on just less than an acre. And we decided to sod the whole house. So now for the first time in my life, I had a lawn that I was going to care for. So within weeks of the spring and the grass being laid, I went out to our local Sears store. Remember those? And I bought a garden tractor, a gray ride behind, sit in the seat with a steering wheel tractor, because I was going to cut my lawn every week. And
But Jim, it was less than an acre, you said?
It was less than an acre, just under an acre. But just the same, it was 2 or 3 hours of commitment every single weekend. It wasn't a big tractor. And it wasn't long into the season that I really started to regret it. In fact, I was really getting kind of anxious and upset because I was working crazy hours getting my practice business started. I really didn't see my family much at all during the week. I would leave when it was dark out, come home when it was dark out. And it was just the weekends that we could hang out. And here Dad is spending hours outside. So I immediately said, nuts to this. Let me find somebody. Let me find a great landscaper in the area who could cut the lawn. Maybe they wouldn't take as much time as I did. Maybe they wouldn't do it exactly the way I would do it. But man, oh man, I could not put a price tag on the amount of time that was freed up. The reason I mention that is when you're dealing with the complication of investment, retirement planning, the economy, taxes, and all the other iterations, it's vastly more consuming. It's vastly more complicated. And if you intend to do it yourself, you're going to have to spend quite a bit of time, which means you're going to have to make critical choices on what things you're not going to spend time on. Or you take the advantage of finding your who. Who's the person who I will trust that will give my life back, give and free up time to allow me to pursue things that I have far more enjoyment doing in the first place.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned knowing things, reading, studying. What about the emotional part, the third sign here, when emotions start getting involved?
Yeah, emotions and often most investors are and turn out to be their own worst enemy. You're just too close to it. And I think that's also one of the reasons, and I don't know if it's a rule or not, but you see this quite often, that physicians and surgeons aren't allowed to or somewhat restricted from doing surgery on close family members. There's a lot of talk about, you don't want to be your own attorney representing yourself. You just simply have an awful lot of things that would cause you to second guess decisions, maybe not make the hard decisions that are really necessary. So when we are doing this ourselves, our emotions do come into play. And there are a number of trip ups that we see quite often. One of the biggest is what I would call daily market stalking, where, we're looking at the market on a constant basis, especially if this is our retirement money. And think of what that does. If it's a good day, we're happy and joyful. And if it's a bad day or a big bad day, there's emotions involved, etc., because you're responsible, you're in control. And as a result, it's feast or famine. To me, that daily stalking would be like watching a really bad horror movie on a loop, where it's just constantly playing all the time, year in and year out. So that's a big issue. Another one is just simply falling for media hype. Remember, we have so much access to information these days, whether it's on the phone we carry or on television, Bloomberg, CNBC, Fox Business, et al. And we've got to remember that it's less about information and it's more about entertainment, infotainment, if you will. So everybody there is there to get you to continue to watch the advertising that is really what they're there for. That's their modus operandi. And as a result, there's a lot of conflicting information. They'll have one guest that's pro-market, one guest that's anti-market. There's something for everybody, depending on your immediate view on the market. So the less you spend watching that, generally, the better. And then another thing that we see a lot is just bad decisions on fear and greed, whether that is, buying high and selling low, or missing opportunities along the way. And then I guess the last thing with emotions is, and this is kind of a tough one to ascertain, but maybe trusting the wrong people. There are a lot of people out there that say their advisors carry the moniker of an advisor, but at the end of the day, maybe they're not certified financial planners, maybe they're not even registered investment advisors, and deep down, what they're really doing is their job is to sell some particular type of product, and they're going to make that product look very appealing, and they'll make the product seem like it's something other than what it really is. Sadly, it's not something you realize immediately, but you realize it was a problem way down the road when it becomes a whole lot more difficult to unwind. So emotions are a big issue, and using a trusted advisor, finding your who, provides an incredible filter and filters you from a lot of this input that would cause a lot of this emotional strain.
And a lot of what you've been saying does all tie into number 4. This is the big one. You don't know what you don't know.
Right. That manifests a whole lot of ways. At 30,000 feet, not knowing what you don't know creates the ability to make a whole lot of uninformed decisions. You miss opportunities. And in some cases, because of that, it enhances some element of anxiety. Poor decisions as a result of not knowing what you don't know is pervasive. We see it all the time. And there's a number of effects that are out there. There's a scientific effect. I think it's called, I've got it written down here, Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
I have that actually at my desk right here.
No way.
Oh, yes. A cognitive bias in psychology whereby people with limited knowledge or competence in a given intellectual or social domain basically think they know everything anyway.
Yeah. I would have just said limited knowledge tends to create kind of an overstatement of confidence.
Yes.
And competence. So not only do you think you can do everything, and believe me, I've been there. I've tried to fix toilets, and I was way into a toilet repair when finally Dina said, yeah, we should have called that plumber in the first place, right? I've been there, done that many times. It also causes you to somewhat underestimate the scope of what's really needed. If we're super confident on everything, we don't realize there's a lot of other moving parts. If retirement planning was as simple as, let me just buy the S&P 500 index and ride this thing out, and I'll try not to look at it and everything will be fine, you'll probably get to where you need to get to, but you won't be anywhere near as effective and efficient as you could have been had you applied a number of tactics and strategies along the way, affecting things like taxes, things that you wouldn't normally consider if your focus is just, I need to beat or achieve returns that look like the market. And then when you have this overconfidence, it's nearly impossible to do critical thinking. You can't put in place a series of steps leading to a resolve because you just don't have the background to be able to consider all the alternatives because you are so narrowly focused. Another problem with not knowing what you don't know is you dismiss a lot of other advisement, expertise. If you think you've got this thing handled, you know everything you need to, then you think in every aspect of your life, you're the smartest person in the room. So why would you care to take advice from anybody? And all I can say is, Tiger Wood has coaches. There are people who are smarter than you and are narrowly focused in other areas of life. So you could be a brilliant engineer, a brilliant surgeon, a brilliant educator, working with somebody who is engaged and works fully in the area of wealth management or financial planning or retirement planning. You may find some benefit there that makes the relationship all worthwhile.
Well, your fifth point I find a little surprising, actually. You're getting closer to retirement. In fact, you are looking at retirement. You're staring it in the face. But isn't that too late for stopping your DIYing?
Actually, it's just the opposite. Think of it this way. The closer you get to the end point, the faster things start to move.
Sure.
There are a lot of decisions that have to be made as you near retirement. A lot of decisions, critical decisions that have to be made within a very short period of time. I'm retiring. Am I taking a lump sum or am I taking a pension? Am I planning on starting Social Security right away? Because that's what a lot of my friends are doing. Or should I consider pausing and delaying that? And if I do, how am I going to create cash flow to cover that period of time between now and Social Security? What do I do about post-retirement healthcare? I work with a number of engineers, and these people are brilliant. And they all have their own spreadsheets. They all have better looking Excel spreadsheets than I do. And it's amazing as we get closer and closer to retirement, how we start to adjust what cash flow do we really need in retirement, because they come to the realization that, hey, as I look closer into it, I've got a couple of shortfalls here and a couple of gaps in healthcare. I'm only able to carry my corporate healthcare for 18 months, and then I'm not yet old enough for Medicare. And these are things that if you just left it to, hey, I've got my big 401k and I'm planning on retiring April 1st, and I'm turning the paperwork in a month before, and I'm having my retirement party and I'm off to the races, you're going to miss a lot of opportunities. So it's really, really important to engage somebody who does this type of work on a regular basis. It's also the math around accumulation versus the math around decumulation and spending is completely opposite. So as a result, our risk profile, or what we used to do in market dips while we were working and many years away from retirement, may be quite a bit different as we're getting much, much closer to or in retirement. There was a famed portfolio manager, and I was reminded of this earlier this week, she used to say, there's really only two risks that we need to worry about. The risk of capital loss and the risk of opportunity loss. And if you manage right, there will always be other opportunities. So it's not like, oh, I'm missing out on this one thing. But boy, oh boy, if you get the capital thing wrong and you take a big loss on capital, you never have the opportunity to take advantage of all the other opportunities that come about. So while you're 30 years away from retirement, you can focus on, I don't want to miss opportunity. I want to be very aggressive. I want to have money here or here. But as you get closer to that retirement, the focus should really be on capital preservation. How can I continue to grow? But the portfolio itself has much less risk than it had while I was accumulating. The math is different. So it's important to engage with someone to, if nothing else, just fact check. Here's kind of what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm planning on doing. Am I missing something here or not? Because more than likely, you probably are missing something, whether it's retirement, whether it's tax efficient cash flow, whether it's healthcare, or any of the other iterations that we have to deal with as we transition to retirement and as we start building cash flow from this money that's taken us 35 years to accumulate.
Basically, what you're saying is if you bring in a pro, it could be one of the smartest things you ever do.
I would totally agree with that. That's an absolutely truthful statement. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Jim, thank you so much. Folks, if some of these signs hit home, it might be time to talk to someone. We always recommend reaching out to a trusted financial advisor, someone who understands retirement planning and takes the time to learn what matters most to you. Now, if you don't currently have someone you trust, you're welcome to take a look at Jim and his team at Kaydan Wealth Management. You can visit www.kaydanwealth.com to learn more, and you can even schedule an introductory call. And to help you make the right decision, no matter with whom you work, we've also added a free resource, 5 questions to ask before hiring a financial advisor. That will be in our show notes. It's designed to help you avoid common missteps and to find the right fit. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and of course, share it with someone who could benefit. Follow at Kaydan Wealth on social media and let us know what you think in the comments. Your feedback and topic suggestions help us improve and make a bigger impact. Thanks for supporting our show.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Retirement Engineer with Jim Kruzan. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.kaydanwealth.com or give us a call at 800-638-6900. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of Jim Kruzan and this episode's guests, not necessarily those of Kaydan Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.